Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast, hosted by Dr. Erin Phillips, Director of Cross-Cutting Programs and Acting Senior Director of Research at the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. The show highlights SER's role in supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development in the state of Wyoming.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast where we look at the innovators, the engineers, and the visionaries keeping Wyoming at the pinnacle of the global energy map. Now, we all know Wyoming is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to traditional energy, but the frontier is shifting. The next era of energy isn't just about extracting molecules. It's about refining critical materials, securing advanced power grids, and hosting the massive computing infrastructure powering the next century. And our guest today is a triple-degree University of Wyoming alumnus who graduated magna cum laude, and he spent over a decade guiding corporate strategy, regulatory navigation, and project execution. From his work advancing North America's premier rare earth deposit at Rare Element Resources Bear Lodge project, he knows what it takes to turn complex engineering into economic reality. He's fluent in French, finance, and the future of Wyoming's economy. Joining us today is Paul Bonifas. Paul, great to have you on the show.
Thanks. This is great. My first podcast.
All right. Well, Paul, we always start off by having our guests tell us about themselves. So please give us a little introduction on your background and your career.
Thanks. Well, maybe I could start that I was born in France, and my whole family's French. And we moved to the United States when I was 4 years old. I'm 36 now, so we've been here. That's quick mental math. That's 32 years. We first moved to South Texas before moving to Wyoming when I was 12 in 2002. We were following my father's career. He's a geologist in uranium. So he's a uranium geologist and currently works for Energy Fuels. And so from there, typical Wyoming story, moved to Casper, junior high, high school, and went to the University of Wyoming for college, where I got my chemical engineering degree. And that was really where I guess the career started. And right after that, moved to Texas and worked as a petroleum engineer in Dallas for Encana Oil and Gas. Then kind of bopped around from there, moved to North Dakota, worked in the Bakken, before eventually coming back to grad school at the University of Wyoming. And I got my MBA and my master's in petroleum engineer, thanks in large part to Dr. Fan at the College of Engineering. Shout out Dr. Fan.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess that's my education, and then just have essentially worked in energy my entire career. It's gone from oil and gas to oil and gas midstream to I worked in hydrogen for a while, and solar, mining, uranium, rare earths, some data center stuff, and most of it has been Wyoming centric because it's a great state for energy. Agreed.
Yeah, an interesting varied background that you have.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned the 3 degrees that you hold from the University of Wyoming. So with that, you've sat at the intersection of traditional extractive industries, advanced energy, and project development. How does that broad technical and economic worldview shape how you view Wyoming's specific role in the evolving global energy landscape?
Well, I guess first we got to figure out what the evolving energy landscape means, right? So if we look back for the last century plus, since the Industrial Revolution, it was pretty much all coal power, had a little bit of oil, a little bit of gas. And then it kind of starts to diversify, and Wyoming does coal very well. Big fan of Powder River Basin coal, and we also have great natural gas power plants here. And then the evolving energy landscape is, the so-called renewable landscape. So solar, wind. I think anybody in Wyoming has seen the wind turbines. Not so much solar. I mean, there's the projects in Sweetwater County. I think that might be the only kind of utility scale solar in Wyoming. So I think many people are aware that Wyoming not only extracts a lot of the energy materials, whether that be coal or natural gas, uranium, to be in nuclear power plants, but it also produces a lot of that electricity here. And over the last few decades, Wyoming has been kind of at the forefront. With the political winds changing, all of a sudden, you got to build wind. Now things change and you don't want to build wind. Same thing with solar, same thing with coal. Things kind of come in and out of vogue. And the most recent headline, new next energy frontier is rare earths. It's what everybody's talking about. And Wyoming has significant rare earth deposits, including in Crook County, outside of Sundance, the Bear Lodge deposit, which is owned by RER, as we like to call it.
Yeah, excellent. So let's dive into that a little bit more. What drew you personally to focus heavily on that intersection of mining, critical minerals, and energy in your current role at RER?
Yeah, I think I come from a family of geologists. My father's father, my grandfather, Pepe, he was a uranium geologist for his whole career and worked in the mining and extractive industries his entire life all over the world, which led my father to do the same, which ended up with us here in Wyoming. And, so grateful to be here. I feel like, I won the lottery just from my dad's career choice, which was influenced by his dad's career choice. And so I think that was always in the back of my mind. But then, I was part of the kids, I guess, the students who I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got to college. I knew in high school I was good at chemistry. I thought it was fun. The advice I got was become an engineer. You can become an engineer and then you can kind of do whatever you want after that. So I thought, okay, I wasn't really sure what engineers did, but I knew they had a thing called chemical engineering. So I thought, well, that sounds like chemistry. I'll do that. And then you start doing that. And at the time, it was 2008. By the time I graduated, it was 2012. And looking into the job market, you find out, well, the highest paying jobs are in oil and gas. So I wonder if I can work as a petroleum engineer, even though I'm a chemical engineer. Turns out you can. It's a pretty versatile degree. So that drew me to oil and gas, which was a large part of my career. And then when I actually got to grad school, and I really forged strong connections at the University of Wyoming when I got to grad school, including in the College of Business through my MBA. And years down the road, that led a mining company to hire, you have to fact check me on this, I think it's called the Center for Economic Research. David Adlin runs it in the College of Business.
College of Business and Economic Analysis?
Yeah.
CBEA?
Yes, that's exactly it. Sorry, David. And so they got hired by a mining company in Wyoming to do a market study and a market analysis on the rare earth market. And they ended up hiring me to do that. The College of Business did. They reached out. And one thing led to another, and the clients ended up hiring me to do more and more work for them. And that client was Rare Element Resources. So it really is the Wyoming and specifically the University of Wyoming connection that directly led to this job.
Yeah, those connections are so important.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your role at RER. In this role, you're right at the epicenter of securing a domestic supply chain for rare earth elements. Why is a project like the Bear Lodge project up in Northeast Wyoming so vital right now, not just for Wyoming, but for U.S. national security?
So maybe to best answer this question, we got to take a step back, right? And because maybe not everybody listening to this will even know what a rare earth is. So rare earth elements, if you think back to your high school periodic table, it has elements in there like gold and hydrogen and oxygen. Well, rare earth elements are just 17 elements on the periodic table. So they're just on there. The four most important ones are the so-called magnet materials. And they're called that because they're used to make magnets, high-strength permanent magnets, or some people call them rare earth magnets. And all that means is they're powerful magnets, and they also resist high temperatures. So I'm sure you know this, Erin, but if you take the basic magnet from your fridge, it's probably just an iron magnet. It doesn't have any rare earths in it, and we all know it sticks to your fridge. It's magnetic. Well, if you took that magnet and you put it in the oven, and you got it hot, and then you took it out, don't burn yourself, and you stuck it back on your fridge, it would just fall off. It wouldn't have any magnetic properties. And any electric motors require magnets, and electric motors tend to get hot, so they require rare earth magnets. And the rare earths are what make it so that the magnet can get hot without losing its magnetism. So that's it in a nutshell as to why rare earths are important. So now why specifically the Bear Lodge project is considered to be a world-class rare earth deposit. You have to look at it, because if I just start throwing numbers at you, they'll mean nothing. But in the United States, there's only one active rare earth mine, and it's been active for over 5-6 decades. It's called Mountain Pass, and it's in California, which is surprising because people don't usually associate California with mining, but it is. And by the way, California used to be a heavy mining state, like the 49ers, the gold rush, all that stuff. So California's changed. But the best rare earth deposit is in California. It's called Mountain Pass. To put numbers on there, that deposit is roughly 6% rare earths, give or take. Our deposit, the Bear Lodge deposit, north of Sundance, is right around 4.5%. Okay? So not quite as concentrated as Mountain Pass, but quite strong, especially when I tell you what the next deposits down the list are that are still quality deposits. So we're at 4.5%. They're at 0.4%. Okay? Or if you look at, maybe you could call them non-traditional rare earth deposits. There's a lot of emphasis on unconventional. For example, rare earths in coal, which is a big avenue for the future. Now you're talking about hundredths of times less, right? So if you're talking in ppm, which means parts per million, our deposit, call it 4.5%. That's 45,000 parts per million. 45,000. Rare earths in coal are roughly 300 or 500. So the point is we have a highly concentrated deposit, and we're very excited about that. It's the premier one in North America. So the fact that it's located in Wyoming is just a huge fortune or blessing. It's just you don't get to choose where deposits are. They are where they are, and they happen to be in Crook County, Wyoming for ours. And now that you kind of know what rare earths are used for, again, they're used for the magnets, but those magnets, I said electric motors, but anything in your life that has an on button, your TV, your computer, your cell phone, your car, I'm not even talking if you have an electric car, any car has dozens or maybe, 50 electric motors in it, from the things that open that turn on your windshield, absolutely everything. You cannot power our modern world without rare earths. And that goes to the defense capabilities of our nation. So fighter jets, aircraft carriers, radar systems, missiles, guidance systems, absolutely anything you could think of that you would need for defense require rare earths. And so the only reason rare earths are important and are in the national debate is because China controls between 70 and 90% of all rare earth production and processing and magnet making in the world. And so if you want to simplify it, all you would need to know is that every time the U.S. wants to build a fighter jet, they need to ask China for permission. And so that's kind of something that nobody wants to do, which is kind of why it's a bipartisan issue.
Right. Yeah. So essential for national security and the everyday products that we have.
Yeah.
Yep. So thanks for that background. And you also talked a little bit about the geology. So in addition to the favorable geology at the Bear Lodge, RER is also working on the processing and separation of rare earths at its demonstration plant in Upton, Wyoming. that's supported by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Wyoming Energy Authority. So will you tell us a little bit more about the demonstration facility?
Yeah, absolutely. So mining rare earths is only part of the puzzle piece because, they're called rare earths, so you might be imagining something kind of exotic. Ooh, what does it look like? Does it shine like a diamond? No, when you see rare earths in the ground, in the wild, it kind of just looks like dirts and rocks. And you can't do anything with them until you separate them. So naturally, in any deposit, all 17 of the rare earths, they occur together. They're just there together, all clumped up, all 17 of them. Well, the problem with that is you can't make anything when all 17 of them are banded together. Like I said earlier, only 4 of them are used to make magnets. So you actually have to get rid of all the rest just to get those 4 key magnet materials. And for that, you have to process and separate. And that's the part that China really controls, especially over the last 30, 40 years. So there is a known way of separating rare earth oxides, we call them. And the way China does it, it works. It's uses very old technology and it's environmentally catastrophic. Think giant vats of acid, mixer settlers, of low-tech stuff. We at RAR have developed a new technology that is both proprietary and patented alongside our majority shareholder, General Atomics, to come up with a new solvents extraction method that is closed loop, a smart system. It recycles all of the reagents and the chemicals and the acids so that not only is it more environmentally friendly, but it adds cost efficiencies because obviously you get to reuse what you've already bought. In real time, we can measure temperature, pH, concentration, and it's a smart learning system that is able to tweak the process as it goes. So all that sounds very good. But when you're building a new technology like that, first you have to prove it in the lab, then you prove it in the pilot scale, and then eventually, before you go to full-blown commercial scale, you have to demonstrate that the technology works on a commercial scale without having to build the absolute end-all plant. And so that's what we built in Upton, Wyoming in Weston County. The plant is fully constructed today. We have spent north of $70 million building and operating this plant. We have 25 full-time people working there right now. It's a big deal. And Upton is a wonderful place. They brand themselves the best town on earth. And, I can see why. So 25 people working there. The town itself maybe has a population between 800 and 900 people. So it really brings economic development and breathes life into that community. And that plant is set to operate for 12 or so months. And like I said, it's to demonstrate not only the feasibility of the technology, to prove that it works, but also to get the economics nailed down so that we can then build the large plant. So, we would build the mine because right now it's a deposit. There's nothing up there. It looks like, bare rock. And then we would build the processing facility to process and separate the mine ore.
Excellent. Really working on the full supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can imagine your background in engineering has really helped you to navigate these complex, separation and processing challenges, I guess, and also making those economically viable.
Yeah. So to be completely clear, though my background is chemical engineering, I had nothing to do with creating this process at RAR. Though the process was originally invented by an RAR employee, it was upgraded and developed even more so through the help of our majority shareholder affiliate. So majority shareholder affiliate, General Atomics, which is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. You might know some of their products like the defense drones, like the Predator drone, Reaper drone, things like that. They also make launch systems on aircraft carriers. So we like to call that General Atomics affiliate our mad scientists. They're a whole bunch of PhD chemical engineers, and they have really brought the technology from where it was to where it is today, which has culminated in this demonstration plant in Upton. But my specific background in engineering, I think, like most engineering, it almost teaches you how to think rather than what to think. Obviously, it teaches you very specific skills in math and science and physics, chemistry in my case. But it helps so that even when you're confronted with a problem that maybe you have no idea what it is, you kind of have a pattern and a way of thinking, and you have the tools in your arsenal to be able to get up to speed fairly quickly, ask for help, and be able to contribute. So I really do think that the background of chemical engineering, I like to joke, and maybe it's not a joke, it was one of the hardest things I ever did. The 4 years of chemical engineering is kind of a brutal grind. And, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's like if you can do 4 years of that, short of, inventing some crazy cure for something, you could probably do anything that's thrown at you.
Yep. All right, Paul, well, you've talked a little bit about China. You've touched on China and how developing a domestic supply chain for critical minerals means competing with these well-established, subsidized international markets. From a regulatory and economic standpoint, what are the biggest hurdles to scaling up rare earth production right here in Wyoming?
Yeah, there's so many things, right? Because the full supply chain, it goes from, we like to call it from mine to magnet. So you could kind of think of it as 5 steps in the supply chain. It starts with the mine, then you have to process it. And all that means is you're getting rid of all of the gangue material, which is another word for just the rock and all of the things that aren't rare earths. So once you process it, you end up with a concentrated rare earth product. But again, it's all of the rare earths. It's all 17 of them. Mm-hmm. And so that's step 2. So you mine, you process, and then you have to separate. In our case, our final product is NdPr oxide. So Nd is neodymium. That's one of the rare earths. And Pr is praseodymium. It's another rare earth. And those are 2 very important magnet rare earth elements. So currently, that's what our demonstration plant is showing. That's where we would currently stop at step 3 of 5. And after that, it would go to the metal/alloy, right, where you would create rare earth metals, and then you would alloy it into the iron boron rare earth magnet, and then you would create magnets. So in order to get that full supply chain, it's tough. In fact, we didn't have it in the United States until very recently. I mean, we had it historically, but starting around 1980, when the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, changed its laws, and that's when it went to China. We had it in the United States, but since then we haven't really. And that changed about 2 years ago when the Department of Defense, Department of War, invested in the only operating rare earth mine in the United States, Mountain Pass. And since then, that company has been able to vertically integrate. And there are other companies in the United States that have vertically integrated to some extent. I think the only one that really is from mine to magnet currently in the United States would be MP Materials. But there are others like Energy Fuels that is in the process with new announcements of going all the way to the magnet, right? And then, so we are going halfway through, but we are evaluating ways to also look into, well, maybe we should be making metals, or maybe we should partner with a company that can make the metals in Wyoming. And once the metals are made here, then does it really make sense to ship the metal somewhere else to get the magnets made, or would it make sense to start making the magnets here? And so you can kind of see how the economic effect snowballs as you start developing energy and minerals here in the state. So the Wyoming just got lucky, got blessed, is fortunate because the minerals are here. But now we need to stop sending our mineral wealth to other states or other countries for them to get rich off of it when we can do it right here. And so that's what we're we're trying to start here in Wyoming for rare earths.
All right. Quite the opportunity in our backyard.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, let's talk about another really important piece of this puzzle, and that's community engagement. Such an important part of a burgeoning project like the Bear Lodge project. How do you approach community engagement and help to educate stakeholders about the project?
That's actually probably one of the most important things that RER is doing on a day-to-day basis. Because without support from the community in which you plan to operate in, you essentially can't be there, nor would you really want to. There's so many examples of communities not wanting companies there, and then they essentially find a way to get them out of there. So we have been very active in the Crook County and Weston County communities over the last, almost 20 years that we've been developing this project. Right now, we have two prongs of what the company is doing. On one side, of course, the demonstration plant that I talked about, where we'll be demonstrating the technology in Upton to get ready for the commercialization plant. But on the other side, the Bear Lodge deposit, we want to turn into the Bear Lodge mine. And we are located on a small tract of Forest Service, so U.S. Forest Service. It's federal land, and it's outside of Sundance. And if you want to develop in the United States any mining project or any project at all on U.S. Forest Service land, you have to go through a federal environmental permitting, call it review regulation. It's a very, very in-depth, highly regulated environment. And it's called NEPA. That's the acronym, right? NEPA. And so we're in NEPA right now. And it's great, right? Because it allows full transparency. And in fact, we're part of a program, a federal program called abbreviated FAST 41. And what that allows, it's kind of a misnomer because it doesn't actually allow you to cut any corners or go fast or not do things that you otherwise would have had to do. I'm talking air quality, water quality, environmental studies, so-called bugs and bunnies, the cultural studies. Are there any tribal issues? All of the things that matter when developing a project. All it does is that it coordinates all of the various federal and state agencies together so that things aren't happening one after the other like they used to happen. So for example, maybe the EPA had to do a study that would take 8 months before it could go to the next agency, and maybe there'd be a period of 2 years in between the two permitting agencies where nothing would happen because there'd be a backlog. So all it does is it coordinates everything to make that entire time period shrink, as well as it adds transparency. So today, if you went on Google, you could type in Bear Lodge permitting NEPA dashboard, any of those words, and just press enter, and you would find it. It's on the public website. It's a federal website. And right there, you see the entire timeline. You see every permit we are applying for. You see when we submit it. You see when it's reviewed. You see when the public comment periods are. The U.S. Forest Service has a similar website that does the same thing. So everything is very public and very transparent. So for community engagement, we do various things. We have RER people that live in Crook County, in Weston County. They are integral parts of the community. They're ex-coal miners. They are small business owners. And, they live there. They camp there. They fish there. They hunt there. They hike. These are people that care and want to see the wildlife thrive and the natural environment continue. So, I'm from Wyoming too. I've been here most of my life, and I like to do all those things. So it's very important to us that not only do we do the right things. Now, first of all, we have to, right? There might be a misconception out there that, you can kind of sneak projects in under the radar. I mean, that's just not the reality. The federal government, through the EPA, through the Clean Air Act, through the Clean Water, everything is regulated as it should be. Because we're not China, right? We don't dump chemicals into our rivers and all the fish die. And so all of that is regulated not only on the federal level, but also on the state level. It's people that we know. Most of them sit in Cheyenne, right? With the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. So what are we doing community-wise? We routinely hire interns from the community. We give scholarships. We support 4-H. We're at most of the county commissioner meetings in Crook and Weston County. In fact, next week I'm going up and I'm going to be in Crook and Weston County all week, meeting one-on-one with county commissioners, with road and bridge staff, with the natural resource division of Crook County, with local leaders, local legislators, everybody that has an interest in this project can talk to us. And we'll be at the county commissioners meetings as well. So community outreach is of the utmost importance, and we want to be good members of that community, and we want to hear the concerns and dispel false information. But because it's scary, and I get it. People don't know necessarily what it takes to do a mining project. So, I'll just throw a couple of things out there. No chemical processing or chemical separation will happen in Crook County at Bear Lodge up on the mountain. All of that happens in Upton at the planned separation plant. So up there on the mountain, it really is just getting the rock, crushing it and screening it so that you kind of get as much of the rare earths and as much as you leave as much as the dirt and the rock behind. And then you just ship it over to Upton, which is about 45 miles, 50 miles away.
Mm-hmm. So important to just get that awareness out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I would like to shift gears here a little bit and talk about another one of your roles. As a board director at the 9H Research Foundation, you focus heavily on education in the form of applied projects. What role does the 9H Foundation play in Wyoming?
Yeah, so the 9H Foundation was founded by Gene Humphrey, which Gene is a wonderful man. He's from Burns, Wyoming, the booming metropolis of Burns, a few miles east of Cheyenne. I think he grew up, he would describe himself as a dirt farmer. And Gene had maybe one of the most interesting lives of anybody I've ever met. I'm lucky to count him as a friend, a mentor. And he, after a career in the military, career in oil and gas and energy, he eventually co-founded a semiconductor company. Semiconductors are, microchips, for lack of a better word, which, from my understanding, was his company wasn't manufacturing the semiconductors. It was making products that help manufacture the semiconductors. And it was quite a successful company that he sold a few years ago. And he wanted to give back to the community and the state that he credits with a lot of his success, a lot of his upbringing. So he's a Vietnam War veteran. He was he was a combat helicopter pilot in Vietnam, Purple Heart recipient, got shot down a whole bunch of times, got shot, was full body cast, kind of the most interesting man in the world, great attitude the whole time. And our Army National Guard 2 for Wyoming, and actually went and fought and flew helicopters in the first Desert Storm in Iraq in 1990. So, he was 40-something. So he went from Vietnam to flying in Iraq and watching tank battles from the sky. So he created the 9H Research Foundation, which was named after his ranch, 9H Ranch, outside of Laramie, Wyoming. It's about a 40,000-acre ranch. He's developing energy projects on there, data center projects, and it's also a working cattle ranch. It's a family ranch. It's his son, his nephew, his brother, some hired ranch hands. They run about 3,000 head of cattle. So the foundation was a way for him to give back specifically around the University of Wyoming. So we fund scholarships, internships, competitions right here at the School of Energy Resources. We've done scholarships. Our interns for the last 5 or 6 years have worked on what we like to dub the Smart Ranch projects. So that's ranging from drones that can autonomously detect weeds using LiDAR and other sensors, and then relay that signal to another drone that can then go and actually spray those weeds. So things like that, to creating geothermal stock tanks that don't freeze in winter as much as the other stock tanks, to robotics. We partner with a local company, a robotics startup called Uplink Robotics here in Laramie, which are great. You should talk to those guys. That could be a good podcast.
Our next podcast guest.
Exactly. And probably the biggest project that the 9H Foundation has done is a 500 kilowatt solar facility that we built just outside of town here. It generates the energy equivalent of roughly 100 homes a year. And we sell that power to our local co-op, Carbon Power and Light. Big fan of those guys. Shout out Jim Beckman. And that money, those funds, just go right back to the students. They fund senior design projects and engineering, scholarships, internships, competitions, things like that. We focus on applied projects. So that's kind of the focus. We tend to leave the theoretical research projects to other people, and we focus on the applied, building things.
All right. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, you're clearly deeply active on campus today, especially here at the School of Energy Resources. What motivates you to invest so much of your personal time and energy back into the next generation of Wyoming students?
Well, first of all, I love Wyoming. I tell people, jokingly that I'm a French cowboy. And then when I'm around ranchers, I tell them that I'm hard work adjacent, because I know a lot of ranchers, but I don't know if I'm cut out to be a full-time ranch life. Those guys are the real deal. They're tough. They're real cowboys. I'm a French cowboy. So I love Wyoming, and it's easy to quote unquote give back when it gives you opportunity, right? Everything that I've done, I feel, has been returned. A lot of the clients that I have, a lot of the job opportunities and careers have come directly as a result of either people I knew at the university or people I knew in the state, or professors that I knew, or mentors that I did work for when I was a student, or people that I met while I was at the Wildcatters and at the football stadium. So I think this is a wonderful university. I haven't been to all universities, and I've only ever gone to one. Mm-hmm. So I think I could confidently say this is the best university in the world.
I agree. Well, and I'd also like to say I'm so grateful for your and RER's involvement and support of the Critical Minerals Leadership Academy. And for our listeners who aren't aware, this is an academy funded by the Department of Energy and hosted here at the School of Energy Resources. And the purpose of the Critical Minerals Leadership Academy is to train graduate students and early career professionals from across the United States in the critical minerals supply chain, and really to foster leadership capacity in this area. So from your perspective, Paul, why is it so vital that we train the next generation of leaders to think critically about the complexities of critical minerals?
I'm going to answer this question, but when you brought up the DOE, I realized that I forgot to mention that the Upton demonstration plant, the rare earth demonstration plant that I mentioned, was above $70 million in total costs. About $24 million of that has been funded by the Department of Energy, DOE, and they've been great partners. And currently about $4.4 million of that has been funded by Wyoming's own energy authority. That kind of support and investment, both at a state level and at a federal level, is of the utmost importance, because it is risky to invest in a mine that doesn't exist yet. It is risky, financially risky, to invest in a technology that has not been proven at commercial scale. And though the vast majority of the funds that we've used, $170 plus million, RER has spent developing its project. So, public funds of that have only been, call it less than $30 million of the 170. So the vast majority of it has been private funds. Mm-hmm. But the confidence that it gives private investors to have entities like the DOE or the WEA invest in the project, it really does unlock private capital, 10 to 1, 20 to 1, whatever the number is. So those are very important. To go back to, can you repeat the end of your last question?
Sure. From your perspective, why is it really important to train the next generation of leaders to think critically about the complexities of critical minerals? Yeah.
So what I would say, there's a couple things there. The United States got rid of its Bureau of Mines. Okay, so most countries, call them developed countries, and even developing countries, historically have had bureaus of mines. It's an entire government entity that recognizes the importance of mining and puts resources behind that. The United States had one of these for the longest time. And there's a saying in mining, and I love it. It's, if it isn't grown, it was mined. And it seems like a simple saying until you stop and think about it for a second. Every single thing that you have in your life, it either came because somebody grew some sort of crop or raised some sort of animal that was eating the crops, or it was mined, literally came from the earth. And mining, of course, includes extractive industries like petrochemicals, oil and gas. So mining is extremely important. And the United States is starting to get back on the right track there by funding a lot of its domestic mining projects and domestic mining processing projects. But countries like China not only have caught up over the last few decades, but they have surpassed us tremendously because of geopolitics, because of the economy, because of different government systems, all sorts of things. But as a specific example, China not only did not get rid of their equivalent Bureau of Mines, but they grew it. And they have universities that have top-notch mining engineering programs. The United States has almost none. Almost none. There's a handful of schools in the United States that offer mining engineering programs. In fact, Wyoming doesn't even offer a mining engineering program. We offer other great engineering programs, petroleum, mechanical, chemical, civil, but no mining engineering. And that might seem like a small detail because, of course, you could get a mechanical engineer, you could get a civil engineer, petroleum engineer, and they can work as mining engineers. But that's not actually what they were trained in. That's not what they thought they were going to do. And that's not even what our young graduates might not even really know that mining is a career for them. So it is vitally important that we revive that in the United States, because if we want to not be dependent on foreign adversaries or even foreign allies, then we need to bring back the industrial might of the United States. That, you look worldwide, and I'm like a history nerd, and the things that all, powerhouse countries have in common throughout history is that they had powerful industry, which allowed them, of course, to have a powerful military. But without the powerful industry, if you're not building anything, you're not really a country. You need to make things. And I think we're starting to get smaller, but make no mistake, we are playing catch up, specifically with China. And, American ingenuity and work ethic is world-class. It's second to none. And so I think we are catching up, but we are behind.
Yeah, I think it's really important to just be training that next generation right now. Yeah. Yeah,
and the School of Energy Resources does great, and it has, the program names better than I do, but, we host a lot of your students every year up at RER at Bear Lodge, and, thanks to Senator Ogden Driscoll, we had a beautiful view of Devil's Tower last year after touring the core shed and the mine site.
Yes, that was an excellent experience. So, Paul, with your work with initiatives like the CMLA, the Critical Minerals Leadership Academy, and entities like the 9H Research Foundation, you deal directly with student innovation and these competitions you were talking about earlier, and applied research. So, what is something that the current crop of UW students is doing that gives you the most confidence about Wyoming's long-term economic resilience?
I see it the most in the interns that we hire both at the 9H Research Foundation and at RER. When I review these resumes, I almost start feeling guilty that I didn't do more when I was an undergrad. I mean, these students, if you would have asked me when I was 19 years old to just build a robot, I would have said, well, I can't do it. Nobody can build a robot. You have to go to NASA or something. Who builds robots? All of these students nowadays have literal robot building experience. They can all code. Okay, a lot of it's vibe coding, but they have skills, both software and hardware skills, specifically in robotics, that really shock and amaze me. And I was at a competition. It's called First Robotics. It's a worldwide competition of mainly high school and younger students, junior high and elementary school students, building robots, and they do it in a fun, competitive atmosphere. And I ended up going to the World Championship in Houston, Texas, where there's literally hundreds of thousands of people packed in an arena, and they're essentially battling with these robots. They're like completing obstacle courses. And you see these robots, and these teams are sponsored, I'm not exaggerating, by NASA, by Google, by HP, by some of the biggest engineering companies in the world. And these are, sometimes they're not even teenagers, they're preteens building these robots that I previously would have thought only, the most advanced MIT engineers could have built. So that gives me hope for the future, because, any teenager or young person who is showing that much interest in such a technical and nerdy, right? I say that in a good way.
Yeah.
Such a nerdy field, I feel like has a very bright future, even if they don't work in robotics afterwards.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, very.
So what is the single biggest piece of advice you have for the next generation of UW engineering and business students who want to build a career in Wyoming's energy sector?
I don't know if I'm great at giving advice. I'm great at not listening to advice. I'm good at that. But yeah, I'll give unsolicited advice. I could do that. So I don't know. When I was younger in school and at the very beginning of my career, I was under the impression that everybody around me knew what they were doing and knew what they wanted to do, more importantly. Because a lot of people do know what they're doing. But I thought everybody knew what they wanted to do. And I think the older I get, the more I realize that almost nobody knows what they want to do. You have the exception, right? The guy who's like, I always wanted to play the cello, and now I'm a cello player.
Yeah.
That exists. But you don't meet a lot of those people. And that used to really freak me out. And now it really, really doesn't. And I think the advice that I would give, and it's not specific to, Wyoming necessarily, or critical minerals or robotics, is just that the uncertainty you're feeling is not only normal, but everybody is experiencing it. Even like the 50-year-old who's the manager at your father's company has no idea what he wants to be when he grows up. And that's okay. And if you just keep doing something, even if you're like, I don't really like my job, I don't know if this is for me. If you just keep working hard, it sounds so cliche, but I think cliches come because eventually they're true. If you just work hard and you don't screw people over and you have a good attitude, and you will eventually just kind of fall into something that you like. And if it's not the case and you're doing something and you're listening to this and you're like, well, that's not true because I hate my job right now and I'm doing this. It's like, well, then just do something else. Just do something else. And I understand, there's people that are more or less fortunate that have situations that are more or less difficult, but there's so many examples out there of people just changing. You can just change. And I always tell people, like, you don't know if that job opportunity is a good one? Well, why don't you try it? And if you hate it, why don't you just quit and do something else? So that's what I would do. Don't take everything so seriously. Yeah.
All right. I think that's great advice.
Perfect.
Well, before I let you go here, Paul, I have one more question.
All right.
And I know you grew up in France before coming to Wyoming. Where is your favorite place in Wyoming, and how does it compare to where you grew up?
Oh, man. Well, I think when you say where I grew up, it's kind of like where my family is from in France, right? Because I was 4 when I left. It's pretty early, but I go back every summer. So, the south of France and Provence is quite different from Wyoming. They're both quite beautiful, but places that I love in Wyoming, I like the outdoors. So there's so many places like Fremont Canyon and Alcova outside of Casper is beautiful. People rarely bring up Casper Mountain, but there's a great hike up there, like the Bridle Trail, that I love to do. There's kind of a hidden blue hole outside of DuBois, Wyoming. That's a hot spring, or maybe better called a lukewarm spring. But, I don't know what temperature the water is, but even in the dead of winter, you can go and not freeze and swim in there. I really like Box Elder Canyon outside of Glen Rock. I love Vita Vu. How could I forget Vita Vu? That place is awesome. Scrambling up rocks. I've gone there so many times, and I've climbed to the top of various boulders so many times, and I don't think I've ever taken the same route twice, which is like the best. So all those places are wonderful. Devil's Tower, probably one in the whole Black Hills region. Man, there's so many great places. The Hewlett is beautiful. The Bighorns. I don't know. I feel like There's so many great places in Wyoming. And how does it compare to the south of France? I mean, it's so completely different. The south of France is better bread.
Yeah.
Wyoming has much better steak.
Yeah, there you go.
You'll see cowboy hats in Wyoming, and you'll almost never see a beret in France. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there you go.
All right. Well, all great choices there, and even some hidden gems, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, Paul, thanks so much for being here. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.